My name is Brock, and this is the Dungeon Master's Toolkit podcast. On today's episode, I talked to Caleb from Tavrn, a tabletop RPG social media app to help you find friends and groups based on what types of games you want to play and how you want to play. This episode was recorded before the Kickstarter went live, but it has gone live now on October 1st. So be sure to check that out. I will put a link in the show notes. Along with discussing the Tavrn app, we also talk about brainstorming, campaign arcs, music, archetypes, and some campaign prep and advice for new and veteran DMs. If you're interested in helping out the show, don't forget to like, comment, and share the episodes. Contact me if you or a DM you know would like to be on the show. Use any of the affiliate links in the show notes. Or support me over on Patreon or buy me a coffee. And with that, let's jump into the episode. Welcome, everybody. Today I have Caleb, CEO of Tavrn. Welcome, Caleb.
Hey, Brock. How's it going? Thank you for having me on here.
Yeah, glad to have you. Caleb, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in tabletop role-playing games?
Sure thing. So, just for the longest time, narrative has been such a huge part of my life. God, as a kid, I wrote this dumb little sci-fi satire novel, just like front to back, and like went to Amazon, had it published, and then got into like amateur acting in Hollywood for a couple of years because everything I did needed to be a story. So then I narrative has been such a big part of me for so long that when I found out about Dungeons and Dragons, I found about Critical Role. I'm like, oh crap! So people actually hang out with friends, tell stories together, improvise, act all at the same time. Basically everything that D&D and tabletop role-playing was hit every single one of my boxes. So I just kind of dived in, spent a bunch of money on source books and a D&D table and all that kind of stuff to just get as invested in it as I possibly could.
And when you started, did you start out as a dungeon master, as a player?
Oh yeah, it started out as a dungeon master for sure, because no one I knew at the time was playing or you had even like heard of D&D or was doing any kind of gaming like that. So I knew I was probably going to lead the story, but that wasn't any problem with me. I love taking charge of narrative like that.
And what system did you come into to start with?
Like a lot of people nowadays, I started with 5th edition D&D. Since I heard about the hobby from Critical Role, it just seemed like the natural starting point.
The good old gateway drug to tabletop role-playing games these days. I saw a TikTok of yours, and you talked about a method of brainstorming that I really liked. So could you tell us about your brainstorming method?
Sure thing. Yeah. I'd love to talk because I'd love to talk about your like style of preparation as well. Because a lot of people, I hear this question a lot from whenever I'm talking about ideas for worlds that I've done or like creative things that I'm working on. Of like, oh man, I can never come up with an idea like that. How long did it take you to get to that point? How long did it take you to make this idea? And what comes with that is an assumption that creativity and brainstorming is just sitting in a room waiting for a thought to come to you. Just thinking really, really hard until creativity spurts. And that's really not how it works. That's not what creativity is. Creativity, if you're doing it that way, you are doing something wrong. In a good brainstorming session, you should be asking yourself questions. All brainstorming is answering questions, right? Creativity does not work in a void if you're just sitting there looking for things to come to you. So basically, the way I start with that is every brainstorming, at least effective brainstorming, if you're trying to do it for something, for writing, for a narrative for D&D, then you're got to have a goal moving forward. If you're already inside of a campaign, then that's going to look like something like, I want to do another session, another arc coming up that is just a grim, dark city noir fantasy session. And your goal is to figure out what a good plot points are, figure out where they're going, and set motivation through them throughout it. So brainstorming at that point is asking question after question after question of, okay, what themes do I want to include in this arc? And then you answer questions from that. Like, I want a drug heist in the middle of it. I want them to be on the run from the law. I want there to be corporate outliers chasing them down and manipulating the city. And each one of those answers gives you more questions to branch off of. So when it comes down to it, good brainstorming is just a conversation with yourself in which in which case you're interrogating inspiration ideas. Sorry if they got a little bit rambly.
No, that's perfect. When I saw your TikTok on this brainstorming method, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. It's not necessarily intuitive sense. I think like you found people are think that it's just sitting down and coming up with stuff, but in reality it's when you start asking all of these questions of who, what, where, when, why to your previous answers, that's when you start to kind of grow this spider web of ideas.
Exactly. Yeah, it really is. You're making a web of connected ideas. So you don't, it's like you're constantly giving yourself a hand. If you have a question that you don't know how to answer, like, I don't know why my players need to care about what this villain is doing. You can drop that question, and just that spider web of ideas, like you're talking about, continues branching out and making connection after connection, so that when you're coming into a new like problem that you need to solve, you have all of this extra information around you that you can just sort of knit together, as opposed to having to create something whole cloth.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the other things you mentioned in that video was you don't always have to answer every question, and sometimes leaving that up to either the players or just letting it marinate for a while and see what happens. Maybe something later down the line will answer one of your previous questions.
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of, I think, dungeon mastering in general, is it's okay to leave spaces. Because I am sort of 50-50 on prep versus like improv when it comes to a DMing style. So a lot of the times, I like leaving purposeful gaps in my story into the place where I'm like, I don't know what's necessarily supposed to go here, because I know when I get to that point in the game, one or two things is going to happen. Either that is going to be breezed over because the players don't care about it that much. It's not that much of an interest to them in the story, so I can pass over it without needing to spend a ton of extra time diving in deep and scratching my head trying to come up with this idea if it's just going to be blown over. Or the players are going to become very interested in it, in which case their natural curiosity and interest will drive an answer towards that. Whatever they start pushing towards or whatever they start leaning towards, I can give an answer in that direction, and they end up kind of doing the brainstorming work for me. Because if they're interested in it, it's because they've got an understanding or an assumption based on what it's going to be anyways. So that that's why I find that leaving gaps in my story it tends to make the session flow a lot better than trying to plan everything out all at once.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dungeon World, but one of the tenets in there is leave blank spaces essentially for that purpose, right? It either you can cut it out if you need to save time, or you can throw whatever in there that makes sense or something that's more specific to your players as it comes up in the story, because you can't plan for every little piece of a plot line or what the players are going to latch onto.
100%. Yeah. Because also some of the best parts in games are just completely off the cuff. I mean, at any time you've improvised an NPC out of nothing, that always ends up being their favorite character they've ever come across. So I think, what is your stance on just improv versus preparation in your personal DM style?
Guess I would say I'm a bit of a mix. I like to have a general idea of like who people are that they might need to talk to. I find it somewhat difficult myself to come up with some of those like random NPCs and stuff off the top of my head. So if I have kind of a general idea, but then I'm not really planning out dialogue or anything either. I just, this person is a merchant and they have, these connections in town and here's their general motivation, right? So from that, you can kind of improvise whatever you need at the table. But I like to have something written down, general ideas, and I guess if there's combat involved, stat blocks and stuff like that. But for the most part, I like to have just kind of a high level idea of everything, and then some of the details can be improvised later.
Yeah, I agree with that. I tend to organize my my sessions by arcs. So I'll have a story theme that goes where they're going to go on an adventure that has a certain theme, like train robbery or bank heist or something like that. So they have this overall like bubble that the story takes place in, that I know where it's going. I know hopefully how it's going to end, and I organize my just general like campaign prep in that fashion of having one arc after the other. So I always love asking DMs this question of how do you structure like session prep, because everybody does it differently. You're telling a story in essence, and telling a story where you can't control over half of what's going on is very, very interesting and freeform in a way that everyone kind of takes to differently. So I love doing that, where I set out the theme and put this bubble of where like I know where all of the edges are and I know kind of what direction I want them to move in. But I'm very interested in like how you navigate that.
Yeah, I think that's pretty similar. I haven't run any super long-lasting campaigns, so I've had less experience with, specific like arcs of a story. But I tend to run more one-shots, but I do have that kind of same idea of like, here's the bubble of, like you said, you're doing a heist. So here's the main areas that are really important for the heist. Once you're in kind of that sandbox, you can do whatever you want, but you kind of got to also stay within, it's kind of like a small sandbox that you can do whatever you want inside of. But it is still contained. It's not completely, wide open either. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I have this when I do like session planning, like for what's gonna happen inside of a session. When I get more granular than just the ideas and like big players inside of an arc, I tend to it honestly is a lot of guessing. And I don't want this to feel like railroady. I know my players pretty well, so I got an idea of where they're going to be going, so I can plan out ideas for like the order I want them to go through things. But the way that I tend to like really get an idea for what's going to happen in a session and what I need to prepare for is this usually happens like a day or two before a session, where I'll sit down with my notes and be like, this is where they are. This is what they're looking for. These are the different places that I think they're going to want to go or need to go to, or things that I would like to have happen to them based on the trajectory they've already launched themselves at. And then I sit down with my notes, I go through my music, and I pick, because I do specific songs for like each area. So like, I pick out what song is going to happen when they're in the tavern, what happens when they're talking to the ancient silver dragon, what happens when they're doing mission prep, and I do songs because that really helps me set theme and get that idea really solidly in my head. Because before it's like, it's all very nebulous. Like anything could happen. I've got ideas of where they're going to go, but I don't know quite how that, what the feel of it is going to be, how long to stay where, or what they want to be doing. But for some reason, that part of it of just picking out music for each location or like plot point that they're going to be doing really puts the theme of the session in my head very solidly and makes me feel much more confident in navigating through it now that I've got these like touchstones of each of the different plot points. It also helps me organize based on theme and plot rather than just the context of the event, which means that the sessions feel like they flow a lot better.
That makes sense. Is there a certain place that you're pulling music from to use, or what tools do you use there?
Yeah, I have. So I've got. I have the same kind of music that I use over and over again. I don't like diving into like endless YouTube holes for music because that takes so long. So I game soundtracks. Typically, I've got a couple that I pull aside and I always just go through them for theme. I use Darren Korb soundtracks personally for most of my games. Darren Korb, he did awesome things like Bastion and Transistor. He also a little more recently did the soundtrack to Hades. Amazing composer and musician. So I've got soundtracks from each of his games that I'll just sort of scroll through, and I know most of them by now by theme and feel. So I'll put them together into an organized playlist that I can run through. But for other games that are like more heavily themed or are in a different genre, I'll honestly usually just scroll through YouTube and be like, ethereal fairy Celtic music, and start going through, scrounging like a raccoon through trash heaps looking for music that fits this very specific idea I have in my head.
I love it. YouTube is such a deep rabbit hole.
I know.
For everything. How long do your arcs typically last? Do you have like an idea of, okay, I want this arc to take 3 sessions or 5 sessions, or do you have a time limit on any of those, or what you kind of expect, how long it takes you to get through an arc?
Yeah, I do. And I've been trying to get better with pacing lately. Like keeping pacing up has been so that more happens in a session, and it feels like the story is moving a lot faster. Is something I've been working on a lot lately, and I find getting a rough plan of how many sessions an arc is going to take really helps me understand what is necessary in the story and what needs to be cut out and what's just fluff. But on the flip side of that, like if I go into a session knowing, this is going to take 4 sessions or to get through all of this, if they do something in the middle that's really stupid and they anger an entirely different mini boss and have to be sent on a different quest, I am fully happy to do that. It is, when it comes to like planning how many sessions are going to be in an arc, that is exclusively for my benefit of understanding pacing. Because when I do that, I'm like, okay, all of this thing, I'm going to think about 4 sessions. Can I get that down to 3 sessions? This session where they're just kind of sort of wandering through the desert is just going to be me asking them to make ability checks. And then it's going to be an hour of nothing really plot heavy happening. So I'm going to cut that down, and I think I can do this in 3 sessions pretty reasonably. But that is exclusively for my own benefit of understanding what is important to the plot, so that I can handle pacing. If they do something outside of it that feels necessary to have more time for a different plot they've introduced or something else, I am willing to abandon that on a moment's notice.
Right. If they just completely take a 90-degree turn, then you're going with them.
Oh yeah, I am very quick to kill my darlings in any session. I recently, though, I started running a game for some people who had never played before, or at least hadn't played like collaborative storytelling of like D&D. So they were very excited, very into the roleplay aspect of it, but they didn't know how to like tell a story together. So I organized sessions for them, mini arcs, gradually increasing in narrative complexity. So the first episode, the introduction, it was a full arc in one episode. It was the introduction, got to know all of them, had a little mini in media res arc that they finished up, and got backstories as to where they are now. After that, it was a 2-episode arc. So it was a smaller story that they were a part of and really changed. And it was a really cool, impactful story that they were happy to be a part of that was mostly on rails. After that was a 3-episode arc where they had a lot more like ability to impact the story and were in a much bigger world where they could have a lot more like freedom of movement, but still whole story told in 3 episodes. And by that point, they're really getting the hang of becoming like their own, of understanding pacing of how they impact the story and how they impact the speed at which the story moves, and slowly accepting more narrative responsibilities. Each arc got a little bit longer and gave them a little bit more player agency. And I found that really, really helped them get the grasp of learning how to become a storyteller in this game and understand the purpose of narrative in tabletop role-playing.
Honestly, that sounds like a really good strategy as a new dungeon master to plan and run a 1-session arc, a 2-session arc, a 3-session arc, just to kind of get used to the pacing as a dungeon master.
Yeah,
as well.
I'm sure that would be helpful for any just any new group in general. I did it specifically because they were new to tabletop role playing, but I think because every group has different backgrounds and wants when it comes to role playing and different preferences. Taking a little bit of time to get the hang of their narrative styles, I think would be super, super valuable for any group.
I like it. I don't know if I've really heard... We've talked about arcs and stuff in the past, but not quite in that context. So
yeah.
Why don't we jump into talking a little bit about Tavrn? Do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. Yeah. We're gonna have a little spot talking about Tavrn. So Tavrn is basically a social media platform for D&D. It's a place to find people to play tabletop role-playing games with you based on how you want to play, not just kind of who's in the area or who's posted most recently in a forum. Tabletop role-playing and D&D is getting so big lately, and so many people are wanting to join, but it is really honestly intimidating and at times very unapproachable, because if you don't have any friends that play D&D, you have to be the dungeon master. And if you're not confident in your ability to do that yet, then you just watch podcasts and live streams until it never happens, or someone else comes up with it, or you have to find a group on a forum online somewhere that oftentimes really doesn't work out. So Tavrn is kind of this opportunity to meet people based on how you want to play, because the system I fully believe that most of the like horror stories you see on Reddit or on YouTube from D&D stories come from a clashing of play style. The example I always give is, if you come into a game wanting to be this like swashbuckling hero riding the winds of fate in this escapist fantasy world, and your dungeon master is running a grimdark like Shadowrun like grim world, you might not have a great time. But another player might come into that world and just love the opportunity to try and succeed in a world that wants nothing more than to crush them down. It doesn't mean that was a bad dungeon master or a bad story or a bad world. You just had a different play style and had different expectations. So when you build a Tavrn profile, you build in all your play preferences, roleplay versus combat, episodic versus like long form narrative, dick around shenanigans versus character development, and a bunch of other like play preferences for how you want to play these games. There's also rooms for telling stories from some of your favorite games, talking about your characters, and a little bit about who you are as a role player, so that you can find people that fit the kind of games you want to play. That way, the whole app sort of functions as universal session 0. So you're not fumbling blindly through forums, trying over and over again, and wondering why you're not able to find a good game.
And is this specifically for like 5th edition D&D, or I assume you can put just about any like system in that you're looking to play in?
Yeah, this is system agnostic. So we're gonna have, there are just a ton of different tabletop RPGs that you can play other than D&D. We also want to give this an opportunity to like expand towards other, because I know some people are getting disillusioned with Wizards of the Coast right now, but also there's so many other awesome game designers making really cool games that kind of get blown under the radar. So you'll be able to find people in very specific games that you've haven't been able to find a game in a while, but we're also going to have like spotlights on games you might not have heard of before. What awesome mechanics they have that stand out from some other games, the themes they have included, and work with small creators to like make sure that their games are being seen.
And what is the current status of Tavrn?
Tavrn, we've gone through all of our pre-development and design phases, so it's ready to jump into full development, and we're in a fundraising stage right now to make sure that we can pay all of our developers well enough to get a really, really solid app out there, get as many bugs out of the way, and get a really good platform for this. So we have a Kickstarter coming up very soon. We're actually going to launch the date announcement within the week of when it's coming out. And then after that Kickstarter, we're going to dive into full development and hopefully make the app within 12 months.
Nice. What, just out of curiosity, since I'm a software developer, how many people do you have on your development team?
We're partnering with, I actually don't know if I have the legal ability to disclose who we're working with right now, but awesome group of people. Our project manager ran a gaming store for like 15 years and has a bunch of contacts in the gaming industry. So he's super excited by this. And he's got, I think, 10 developers under him that we're working with.
That's a pretty solid team.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Well, best of luck in the fundraising aspects. I know that can be a tricky part of any business. Can I ask what do you have like Kickstarter details, or like what do you get for backing the Kickstarter, or is it purely just generosity to help fund it?
As far as Kickstarter rewards go, we really put a lot of thought into making sure that you are getting a lot of value out of whatever you donate to. It is a Kickstarter. We're not selling a whole lot of products, but we do still have some really awesome goals to move forward. We're partnering with Level Up Dice to make some really awesome Tavrn dice. We have access to the beta they're going to be doing hopefully a year from now. So you can get first pick to check out Tavrn before it's released, to help us hunt for bugs and suggest features that maybe should have been included that were an oversight, and things to help make the app function more smoothly, be overall a better platform. Some of our stretch goals are things like an in-app virtual tabletop, play together features, so you can roll virtual dice and import character sheets, and like a Tinder style matching feature, so you can automatically match based on like shared play preferences, and sort of swipe through people that way. So one of the Kickstarter goals or rewards, is a 1 year and a lifetime membership for free at the highest tier. So you'll get all of the benefits unlimited for free. It's a freemium app, of course. So, I mean, you'll be able to access and use the app completely for free in anything that you like. You'll be able to have all of the app's functionality for free. But we have a premium feature so that you can access some of those advanced features for unlimited. At its heart, social media networks really are only as successful as their community, and this D&D community is a pretty great one. So we really just want to make a place for that community to be able to grow and to like allow other people to join it easily. And that's sort of the main thrust we're pushing through everything, is that we are gamers. We really love this industry. We want to help it grow. So we have as many features as we can for rewards to make sure that when you back on Kickstarter, you really do get a good amount of value out of what you're paying. But the main thing that we're focused on is just that this is something that people care about and that people want to be a part of and people think would genuinely actually benefit the industry.
Everything, all of the like social media and the trailers and stuff all look very professional. And I feel like when I'm looking at things that I want to kickstart, that's one of the biggest, like, does it look polished already even before you have a ton of stuff done? That's something to look forward to. And you mentioned the scheduling features. I could see the scheduling features being one of the most important pieces in being able to not only find your groups, but also to put out like session dates and stuff, and like, yes, no, attending type stuff. Seems like that would be a huge bonus to the platform.
Yeah. Oh, first of all, thank you for all that. But yes, that is something I'm excited about. This is actually, I think, kind of. I don't think we've told anyone else about that feature yet, but it's hidden. I think we have at the $750,000 stretch goal. Just sort of internally, we have those scheduling features, so you can have a full calendar in front of you and put out all the times you'd be available for D&D for what amount of time, and then it'll match up and see what times work for everybody, and then you can have a yes, I'm attending sort of RSVP thing for that. That's the goal for that. So because it really is the hardest part in any D&D game is scheduling. That is the ultimate BVEG for any tabletop role playing game.
Yeah, one of my recent games, we got confused on when something was scheduled, and like 2 weeks in a row, we like tried to get on, and we're like, oh nope, it's not this week. And just having it fall apart when stuff moves around and people are busy or on work trips or on vacation or whatever, it gets so complicated. So you're the CEO. Do you have any other people underneath you that are helping you directly?
Yes. So on staff, we have there are three of us that are working together. There's me, Noah, who's our designer, and then Daniel, who is our community manager. He's been doing a lot of outreach to help us get more connected in the community and talking with some of the awesome other game developers and publishers in the industry. We also have our project manager, who we've been working with closely the last couple months as we finished our UI design and have gone through pre-development for actually making the app in place, and a couple of software designers that I've been speaking with as well. So we're not a massive corporation coming in here to shake everything up and just bleed some money out of it. We really do just want to make an app that's going to help the industry. But yeah, our team are on staff at Tavrn. It's just us three guys.
That is super cool. So you're a pretty lean team, and you're moving quick.
Yeah, moving quick. Right now we've set up the business enough that it is able to grow at whatever rate we are able to. So if we get just enough to run the app, we'll be able to do that pretty easily and have a prototype out by next year. But if a lot of attention and there's something people really want to be a part of, then we can grow pretty fast. We can add some other employees and add a whole bunch of other features and really grow our development team to whatever point we need to, so that it's able to support and become whatever the community wants it to be.
Pretty straightforward. I mean, it's like you said, it's a social media app to help you find other players and get other people into the hobby, especially. So it seems like a pretty easy sell. I also love the name. It's just a great play on the RPG tropes.
Oh yeah, thank you. It really does sort of show off. Like, that's what we want. We want to be the place that your adventure begins. We want you to meet at a tavern. But yeah, that's thank you very much. I've gotten that compliment a lot. I'm really glad we're able to get that working title.
You mentioned that you started in 5th edition, but then you also mentioned that you've seen other, indie creators and stuff. Are there do you run other systems other than 5e?
Oh, for sure. I've done, Lasers of Feelings, who hasn't done that one? I've done a couple Powered by the Apocalypse games. I've done, City of Mist is one of my favorites recently. I love how well their mechanics play into how much theme affects mechanics, so that like in order to play the game, you have to progress story and really play into the genre of whatever game you're playing. So that's been a favorite of mine recently.
I'd love to talk about that one more. I haven't talked to anybody about City of Mist yet, but I did back their Cyberpunk Kickstarter a couple months ago. So I'm looking forward to getting my hands on that. Do you want to just talk about City of Mist a little bit more?
Sure. It's recently might be the wrong word, because it has been a year and a half since I've got the chance to play that game. But I've been wanting to start up another game recently. Basically, the way City of Mist works is as a player, there are a bunch of so you're in like a normal like American or just Earth-based city, but there are a bunch of superpowered people who are like sponsored by aspects of myths and legends. So this might be someone who has sponsored by the power of Zeus and can hurl lightning bolts and command the weather, or someone who is sponsored by the idea and mythos of Bugs Bunny to do Looney Tunes style escapes and feats like that. So it's when you make a character, and with any NPC you come across, you are building your character into a pre-existing mythos or legend. So on top of whatever personal story you want to tell, you always have this built-in story and narrative and theme that is very easy to like tie you into the world or to other people with similar mythos and create connections very easily. When you introduce NPCs, you can at a glance get a very interesting understanding of who they are, what their goals are, and where they're headed, and how they interact with you. So there are a bunch of other like cool mechanics that like tie into that and how that works. But just the idea that every person is based on their connection to a story or archetype makes integrating role playing with the story and the mechanics very, very easy and very, very fun.
I've always been super interested in the like tag-based stat system that they use.
Yeah.
You don't have necessarily like a regular array of like strength, dex, con, whatever. You have more like specific power tags that say like, oh, I can control fire or something, right? And then you use those when they apply to hurt your enemies or to solve problems or whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely that's something that I think takes a little bit of getting used to as a player and especially as a dungeon master, because it's not super intuitive, but I think it's very interesting. Like, what does that mean when you're like, oh, this NPC has stabbed 2, burning 1, and seduction 3. Like, it's you don't have a health system per se. If I have this many hit points when you're doing it, you're just throwing tags onto people and seeing how they stack and how they interact with things, which is very interesting, and it means that combat and roleplay are basically one and the same, where they have these same exact mechanics, where you can do like roleplay things inside of combat and combat things inside of roleplay, and they're exact. You don't have to change up the form of what's happening at all.
Right. You don't switch from like, hey, we were having a conversation and now a punch got thrown, so now everybody roll initiative. Now we're in combat. It's like it's fluid. It's just all the same. The social aspects of it can be the same as how combat would flow.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the mechanics for throwing a fireball are exactly the same mechanics as using as seducing a guardsman. You're not going to use the same rules, but it's the same. You use dice. You actually use your character the same way. The game flows in the same direction, and that's why keeping track of tags is so interesting, because every action you take has the opportunity to add tags to people. Tags like seduced or bruised or slippery. It's almost a little bit like Powered by the Apocalypse in that way, where it's like every ability has a couple of things that you can do with it in very open wording, like impact the battlefield or ask a question or move an opponent. So it's not as wargamey as some other tabletop RPGs, but once you get used to it, it has a very distinct charm.
Is there anything with City of Mist that after you played it, you've taken it back to other systems like 5th edition or just like GM style or anything like that?
Archetype, for sure. It is, after playing City of Mist, I have leaned into archetype a lot more. Because I used to think like, okay, like if I'm leaning into like trope or like, oh, this guy is a stereotype, that's weak writing. Like that means I'm not being very original and I'm just stealing from something else. But no, the power of archetype is so strong when you're leading a narrative, because it shouldn't act as a replacement for an original thought. It should act as a diving board to make pacing go by faster, because by introducing an archetype, you give people a full assumption of a number of things that they already know about the person just based on the stereotype or archetype you've introduced. But it really is just a launching board to make a much more in-depth character much faster, and to make their like self-contained stories and plots and goals very relevant and apparent without taking a bunch of time to like show them through a black backstory and kind of like strong arming the pacing of the campaign to force players to care about this person. The power of archetype really is just efficiency of storytelling. I've started using that a lot more lately.
Could you give an example of a character and maybe describe a character and kind of what that means by using the archetype?
Sure. Let's see. So if I'm introducing a character that I want to be like, oh, this guy is like the corporate fat cat who doesn't care about anyone for the anyone lower than is doing everything for money to try and progress through the and is squashing everyone else beneath them. And then I will use the archetype associated with that. Big guy, large guy, really nice suit, big old cigar, smoking in his chase lounge with like minions and security guards around him. And as I walk into his office, they know just from the like descriptions of the room that that is the kind of guy that they are dealing with. They've seen him in in media so many times. You know, like, oh, this big guy with the expensive and bad toupee, the expensive cigar, all of the rings, and the big dollar signs around the room. He's probably a fat cat millionaire corporate guy who doesn't care a whole lot about the people under him and just wants to make money. So just with a description, I can give them an understanding of character, which I can then like show a lot faster. Like when they start to like grill into it, like, oh, you don't care about anyone in the city. You don't care about what's going on. You just want to make money. What about all those poor people you're oppressing? He's like, well, I have to make this much money because my wife and children have been taken by the mob, who I am in debt to because I used to work for them. And now with now like 2 or 3 lines of dialogue, you have the first half of a character arc from their assumption of that character based on the archetype to a twist that leads them into a story.
I like that. Yeah, that is a really powerful way to quickly build something. I think I've seen a lot of that, kind of what you mentioned before, of the stereotype is bad writing and being unoriginal. But I do like this idea of leaning into it so that you can then come up with something original using like this twist that you gave to say, here's this generic stereotype, but something else. That's why this character is unique.
Yeah, exactly. If you take a stereotype and just drop it as a stereotype and then never touch it or do anything about it, then a lot of times that is an overseen character that people don't really care much about, and I wouldn't call it lazy writing. I don't necessarily like that term in many circumstances, but it does really get overlooked and isn't very impactful. But if you use it as a chance to make a very efficient introduction to a character, then you can go into the progression of their storyline much, much faster and make an interesting character very efficiently without sort of stepping on the player's toes by making it all about them.
Do you have advice for new dungeon masters?
Let's see.
I really put you on the spot here.
Oh yes, no, it's so much. It's just because there's so much good advice for new dungeon masters. First of all, I would say just do it. Don't be afraid to mess up. I had a lot of times where I'd go and do dungeon mastering for the first couple of times and be like, it needs to be perfect. I need to tell a good story. I need to be very good at this. And then afterwards, if it didn't quite go as planned, I'd get that like dungeon master guilt. I don't know if you know what I mean, but like that, like heavy heart, like, I could have done so much better. I feel bad about all these areas that I wish I'd done better. I wish I'd improved. It's just let yourself be bad the first couple of times. It's okay. Past that, I think something that I struggled with a lot was pushing off what I thought was cool. So if I had like an idea like, oh, this would be a really cool campaign arc for they do this and then they do this, and here's a really cool enemy or a cool city or town they could come across. Oh yeah, I'll push that down to later in the campaign and be like, oh, this is something I'd build up to over a long period of time. If you have a cool idea, implement it. Use it fast. Don't make them scrounge through a couple episodes of nothing very interesting happening, because you want to push off all of your really exciting ideas so that they have more impact later. There's something to say about that in writing, but you will always come up with new fun ideas. And you always have new sort of plot threads to pull on. If you have a good idea, use it, implement it. Don't push it off, because that just makes it so much more fun to the players, because I get to constantly be finding something new and something fun. You will always have new ideas. Don't delay player gratification in that way.
So good advice there. So now I'm going to ask you the next level of this question, which is, what's your advice for veteran DMs?
Oh, that's either that. The fun part about that question is that it has to put me into a very it has to take away all my humility. Think, oh man, what advice can I give to a veteran? I see a lot of veterans that kind of get stuck in the same like they have their play style that they like to run every game in, and they feel like they're very good at it. And so a lot of times they have new players come in or start new games, and they're just running them through their same DM style. I guess the advice I would be is, when it comes to session zeros, treat every story as being collaborative. throw away your playstyle and try something new if one of your players has a different idea for the kind of game that they want to play. Because it really, on top of just making you a better game master and like opening you up with new opportunities, telling different kind of like stories and playing in different like styles and genres of games is a lot of fun. Because when you do the same thing over and over and over again, it can get a little bit droll sometimes. So having the fresh perspective of playing a game that you might not have played before, or in a style or genre that you are unfamiliar with or even opposed to, can really, really help give a really nice amount of context to the games that you are playing or ones inside of your style. So I guess to sum it up, my advice would be feel free to branch out outside of your comfort zone when it comes to play style and genre.
I think I have the reverse problem of that, in that I'm like, ooh, fantasy, D&D, all right, sci-fi, fringes on the edge of space, okay, World War II. Can't ever decide to stick with one.
That's a lot of fun. Nothing wrong with that. That is a very healthy distribution.
If there was one book that you could have created for like an RPG book, a supplement, complete system, whatever, what book would you want to have created?
Easy. For me, that's easy. The Stormlight Archive as a tabletop RPG. I don't know if you've read the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. Incredible fantasy series with very hard magic rules and just great world building. I would love to have a book or a supplement using that as tabletop role playing with built-in rules and TTRPG world building for it.
I have not read that book, but I've heard it come up a number of times in various videos and things that I've seen across the internet. So I'm probably going to have to add that to my read list.
Oh, Brandon Sanderson is an incredible author that has impacted how I run games so much. Everything he does is just a masterclass in writing, and it really reminds you that when you are like dungeon mastering, you're writing like it's the same muscles as writing a novel. You're just leaving it more open ended. So he is just, how he structures plot and like pulls like emotion out of plot points and subverts expectation has just really influenced how I do my dungeon mastering. So I would love to see play a game based on some of his worlds.
So this is for anybody listening. I have not listened to many of them, but I know that he does have a YouTube channel and he does a bunch of like writing lectures and stuff like that. So if anybody's interested, go check out his YouTube channel, because I know he's got a bunch of stuff out there that I have not had a chance to dig through. So
yes, Brandon Sanderson has he was a writing professor at BYU, and all of his lectures are free and available online on YouTube. He also has a podcast called Intentionally Blake, where he goes through a bunch of writing inspiration. But I think anywhere you go for DMing advice, you could just as easily go somewhere for writing advice. Or I guess swap that, reverse it. Any DM can go to any like writing advice and writing resource, and it would help them immensely just in like story prep and in session prep, because you're flexing the same muscles, really.
With that, I think I will let you plug your socials. Where can we find you, and where can we find Tavrn?
Sure. Find Tavrn at tavrn.org. You'll be able to find all of our socials on there, and links to the Kickstarter page that should be coming out very, very shortly. You'll be able to check out our trailer video and learn some more about how the app works and how you can interact with it and support it. So go check it out at tavrn.org. That's tavrn.org. And yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show, Caleb.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun just hanging out and talking with you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Dungeon Master's Toolkit podcast. You can find links to all of the products and resources that we talked about on the show in the show notes. And if you'd like to join the community or find out how to be on the show, check out our subreddit or join us in our Discord server.